Master Tavern Keeper's History of the Old World. And so, Master Tavern Keeper, what is this last loose end that you are talking about? That finishes off the story of the clash between Jaffar and Ibn Hamul and the subjugation of the Sorcerers Islands. And perhaps as a favor to me, could you spell it out for me in layman's terms? What exactly happened? Well, I think I can accommodate you there. Now, although there is only the poem that remains as a written record of the duel, many events of the subjugation still live on in the oral tradition of the nomadic desert tribes, most of whom escaped the avenging blades of the Crusaders. Thus, it was whilst I lived amongst the Tuareg that I heard the tale of why the sea elemental that Hamul had summoned had mysteriously vanished without first destroying Mehmed Bey or Jaffar. It came from the lips of one of their elders, the son of a man who had served under Mehmed Bey and learnt the tale from fellow veterans who had stepped onto the island itself. It went like this.
Drink deep, Outlander, and listen carefully to my words as I finish the tale of the clash of the sorcerers over the island of Al-Wahid. Remember them and pass them along. It was Muhammad ibn Hamul al-Sadiq, breaker of the caress of Laniv, that had poured much of his magic into summoning up the sea elemental from the depths. He was desperate after the defeat of the sorcerers he'd sent upon their flying carpets, and the destruction of the island's main harbour at the hands of the two Efreets from Lashik. The demigod of the waves erupted forth with an explosion of water out in the Bay of Al-Wahid, dousing the harbour town in water and quelling both the flames and the Efreets. This reduced them to naught but steaming wisps, and the kin of Triton consumed them. It was then that the elemental saw the ships of Mehmed Bey scatter like flies before him and took after them. But there was one that slipped under his notice, a boat bearing the men from whence this tale comes. The captain of this ship, Abi Rakib, had been given a secret mission by Jaffar. They sailed towards the beach closest to the tower fortress of the Order of Sorcerers and landed on its sands, even as the Efreets laid waste to the port. Here they waited as the port burned. Upon the emergence of the sea elemental, a salt devil, a sea nymph, sent by Mehmed Bey and bearing a message from Jaffar himself, came to Abi Rakib.
It is time. Break the enchantment. Take this.
And unto Abi Rakib, the salt devil gave them the null stone of Hamuel himself, an artifact that Jaffar had stolen when he had been exiled from the Order. Thus commanded, Abi Rakib and his men began their long march upon the tower fortress of the Order of Sorcerers. The interior of the island was all but deserted. The great mages of the island now lined the stomachs of the sharks of the nearby straits, and many others had perished in the inferno that had once been the port. Of course, there were still some alive, but the scant few that they encountered were quickly put to the scimitar. The party of seamen soon arrived at the tower. The skies out to sea thundered, and rain poured over the frothing, roiling ocean and pelted against the land. The entrance to the tower was guarded by suits of ancient Nehekaran armor infused with air elementals that swooped above the intruders like a swarm of predatory birds. But as they approached, the Corsairs' Nullstone robbed them of their power, and the ancient plate harmlessly crashed to the ground. Upon entering the fortress tower, they then had to follow in the footsteps of Ibn Hamuel himself as he went to face the sorceress Lanif and ascend the tower to reach its zenith. As they ascended, the tower's inhuman protectors crumpled before the Nullstone, and its human guardians fell to the bloody blades of the Corsairs, until eventually they reached the great double doors to the uppermost chamber and pushed them open. Within, they found numerous powerful artifacts, jewels, and stones, glowing as they fed some arcane ritual. A ritual that had summoned the great sea elemental that had erupted forth in the bay. But as they brought the Nullstone towards the center of the room, the glow surrounding each of these began to fade, and each eventually became inert. This still left numerous pieces of glassware filled with esoteric elixirs bubbling in the room, but each of these was easily dealt with by a firm kick. The result of this ransacking was that the sea elemental that had been chasing down Mehmed Bey on the darkest jackal was free to slip loose of the enchanted yoke that had been placed upon it by Ibn Hamuel and return to the depths of the ocean. Hamuel must have felt the loss of control too, which caused him to act unwisely in his duel with Jaffar and resulted in his death. After the demonic Lenif had killed Hamuel, Jaffar could not believe his luck and gladly took possession of both the Serpent Staff and Black Book, as well as control of the Sorcerers Islands themselves and the arcane resources. Things that would be essential in his quest to topple the other man who had slighted him, the Grand Sultan of Al-Hayik himself.
What, Master Tavern Keeper? What?
The Tuareg elder was actually referring to the time when Jaffar had acted as a close and important advisor to the great Sultan of Araby.
Ugh, when was that then?
Well, that was just after his exile from the Sorcerers Islands, actually. The spies of the Sultan had made him aware that the talented young sorcerer Jaffar had been booted out of the Order of Sorcerers and would no doubt make a fine addition to the royal court. Jaffar was thus quickly lured into coming to court, and in his short time there he accrued much power, made many allies, and many enemies. But Jaffar's tenure was short, for the great Sultan was a buffoon who spent all of his time drunk and took great pleasure in ridiculing and belittling everyone around him. Jaffar did not like this one bit, and eventually quit the court, returned to the place of his birth, and began his rebellion.
Oh, yeah. I see.
Anyway, to summarize, let me just say this. With the victory over Hamuel, Jaffar had laid the groundwork for marching upon his ultimate goal, the Sultanate of all Araby. But before that, he would next turn his attention on the city of Kofar. But before we get onto all that, let's take a break and turn our attention to Triton and the other demigods of the sea that you asked about earlier, Heinrich.
Oh, yeah, please. I am all ears.